better.
Stand by for audio. Got it.
It's 8 a.m., and you're tuned to Mississippi's #1 choice for non-stop sports. The Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds.
Where am I?
On the Zone 105.9 and online at thezone1059.com.
We welcome in NFL insider Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. Mike joins us on the Miller Lite guest line. Mike, let's start with Drew Brees. When do you expect him to announce that he's officially retired?
That's a good question. Because of some salary cap implications, you wonder if he'll officially do it after June 1st. Because of the fact that, you can sort of manipulate the cap a little bit that way and break that $22 million up into like 11 this year and 11 the following year. I always sort of thought that, it would probably happen right after the Super Bowl. But, I think the Saints know, certainly, that he's not coming back. But the official part of it, because of the fact that you can do, a little bit of, erasing of the numbers. Well, not erasing, but manipulating of the numbers. It may not be officially done until June. Because you are allowed that one player to be cut after June 1st. So you could literally sign him to a $1 million contract and then cut him after June 1st.
Interesting. Okay.
So listen, with the money manipulation that they're going to have to do this year, because that's always part of every NFL team. I mean, come on, you're juggling the books a little bit, and the Saints have done it over the last 4 years, and trying to get another Super Bowl. Now you sort of to a point where you're going to have to pay the piper, so you're going to have to make some tough decisions. I'd be really shocked if somebody like Trey Hendrickson returned. Trey's going to get a lot of money from somewhere else. Sheldon Rankins, he's going to get a lot of money somewhere else. Jared Cook has just not played up to the amount of money that they're paying him. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Marcus Williams and Jackrabbit, Janoris Jenkins. Because Jackrabbit's contract, I think, is in that $12 to $14 million a year range. You're not going to pay him that. So do you extend that out? Williams is the guy I know, coaching staff-wise, they want him back on this football team. So we'll see what happens there and how they can maneuver money. And there's always leeway. In talking to Mickey and Kai Harley, who really does a lot of these contracts for the Saints, they always write these little codicils that you can sort of turn what would be money into bonus money and kind of throw it on the back end. So for the next 2 years, the salary cap is not going to be really good. So, it's coming out of the 2021 and 2022 seasons, and so they've got a little bit of work to be done there. And what happens at quarterback? I think that to me still has to be addressed. You cannot convince me that Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill is the guy for this football team. You have to go outside of the organization. It doesn't really matter what Sean says. It's like I got coaches in my family. I hate to break everybody this news, but sometimes they don't tell you the truth. Sometimes they lie. Listen, I got a guy on the bayou that I grew up with. Now, he don't lie to me because, I tell him he can lie to somebody else. But, sometimes what he says, I know he's not telling the truth about things, but it is what it is. Coaches sometimes have to say what they have to say. They're like a politician in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, like one.
Mike Detillier on the Out of Bounds Show. How much pressure does it put on Sean Payton to nail this, knowing what Tampa Bay nailed it this year and got to the Super Bowl with a free agent QB?
Yeah, I think it puts certainly pressure. And he always says that as long as I'm here, that window's not going to be closed. I'm always playing for a championship. But this is something, and I said it a few times and said it last night again on Second Guess. Years ago, Hank Stram was part of the WWL crew, and that he did a weekly show. And here was him and Ditka at one time. They both had nights, and so we worked together. And one of the things Hanks told me was, Mike, I'm just telling you, the worst decision you can make is at that quarterback position when you miss. And he said, sometimes you can con yourself. Sometimes you say it enough to the media that you start believing it, that the guy is in the room that can eventually lead you. And he said, when Lenny Dawson got old for me, Lenny had won me an AFL championship in the early 60s. He brought me to Super Bowl I. We won Super Bowl IV. But as Lenny got older, we had Mike Livingston, who had won games for us. But he said, we had a pretty good supporting cast around him. When those guys started to get older and Lenny got older, I had kind of conned myself that Mike could lead us. And he said, I had some loyalty to Mike. He said, I found out there's only one Lenny Dawson. He said, fired in Kansas City. So he said, I spent a year off of football, and man, I got 3 or 4 teams wanting me to come back, and I signed up with the Saints, and I signed for one reason, Archie Manning. He said, I could envision Archie on that podium holding the Lombardi Trophy. He said, I could easily envision that at this time. So he says, the usual Stram luck. He said, first year I don't have Archie at all. He hurts his elbow. He misses the entire season. And the second season he misses part of the early season because of the elbow. And he said he was just starting to round into form, and we lose to Tampa Bay. And he said that was it. The owner was impatient, not with the team, but with me. And I got fired again because of the quarterback situation. And he said it wasn't Archie's fault. He got hurt. But he said I was playing Bobby Douglas and Bobby Scott. They didn't win me much. So he said, what happens the next 2 years? Archie has the 2 best seasons he's ever had in his professional career with the Saints. Best 2 seasons. But he said, I wasn't there, and our defense, he said, really, they didn't have the personnel to back up the offense. So he said, again, you make that bad choice at quarterback, you stuck in football purgatory. Some of those guys can win you some games, but he said, at the end, it's all about championships. It's all about winning and getting deep into the playoffs and playing on Super Bowl Sunday. And he said, you can con yourself. And, they got people that, because Sean has said it so much time, the guys in the room, the next successor to Drew's in the room, Taysom Hill, they got people that actually believe that.
Oh, good
and
grief.
I want Taysom. I want Taysom on my football team. I think he's a tremendous football player. Special teams, running out of that joker formation, receiver, I don't call it RPO. It's or run option. But I want him there. But I don't want him as my starting quarterback.
No.
And, people say, he's young, he's learning. No, he's a 31-year-old quarterback. Okay? So how much more does he have to learn?
Well, he's on the back nine. I mean, most players are at that age. I know because he's out of BYU, it's a little bit different deal. But
and Jalen,
it's too much money, Mike, too. I mean, I know Sean can do what he wants because he's won and he's a phenomenal coach. But you're not getting that ROI. Some of the plays situationally are fine, but it's $16 million too much for what you're getting from Taysom, in my opinion.
You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN Radio 105.9 The Zone. Blake Scott filling in for Bo Bounds. We're excited to have you here on a wacky football Wednesday. Had Fred Smoot in the studio yesterday. We're going to have David Helman, Cowboys insider, NFL guru. David Helman coming up at 8:30 here on the Coors Light guest line. So stay tuned. David Helman on Dak Prescott, the NFL draft, and more coming up at 8:30. This is the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone.
baby. I got some game in store. You're with me now. We'll be again. Other points in between. And the cool mornings.
All right. Good morning. Welcome in. We've got some good audio we're about to drop from Chris Collinsworth talking about Dak Prescott. Collinsworth is the Sunday night NBC color analyst, and he owns PFF.com, where he's one of the owners. Pro Football Focus, great site if you love college football and the NFL and the NFL draft. And Dan Patrick had Collinsworth on his show, and they were discussing, what had happened this weekend as far as Tampa Bay and Kansas City winning. Could Aaron Rodgers be on the move? That's crazy. Matthew Stafford is on the move.
Yep.
That's crazy. And when will Drew Brees officially announce his retirement? And then will Ben Roethlisberger announce his retirement? We're looking at major shakeup across the league at the quarterback position. But this is what Collinsworth had to say when Dan was asking him kind of about the QB room, so to speak, in the NFL and how much movement we could have in the offseason. This is Chris Collinsworth on the Dan Patrick Show.
Dak Prescott is going to determine a lot of things in my mind because I'm assuming Dak gets signed with the Dallas Cowboys. But, man, after this 2020 and 2021 and COVID, I'm not assuming anything anymore. I just don't know what's going to happen.
Interesting. So he's talking about setting the market.
Yep,
Blake. And when Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones and Dak's agent Todd France, I guess, if Dak's going to keep rolling with this guy, when they can get on the same page and do a deal, there's basically two options: a long-term deal that's going to be an enormous amount of money, or $38+ million on a franchise tag again. Right? That's basically it. Or they just decide to go another direction, and Dak is,
which would be insane.
Dak could end up at the Saints, Tennessee, Green Bay, New England. I mean, if Aaron leaves, I know they drafted a quarterback, so we'll see what happens there. But Aaron Rodgers, so we'll see what happens with Dak, right? He needs to get healthy, but then there's all this money hanging around out there. He's without a doubt a really good NFL QB. Won a bunch of games in a dysfunctional organization that hasn't been to the NFC Championship since 1997, 23 years. And they didn't win that one, by the way. That was not Aikman went to 4, he won 3. Or the Dallas Cowboys did during that time with Aikman. But by then the ship had sailed as far as the Jimmy Johnson magic. Anyway, so it's been 23 years since the Cowboys have been to the NFC Championship game. And then think about Aaron Rodgers. He sounded like a guy that was leaving on Sunday.
Very much so.
Like, where could the Saints pull this off? Shuffle around a bunch of people, I don't know. Indianapolis Colts have plenty of dough.
Yep.
$65 million, under the cap and tons of picks. So they're good. New England, they could probably do it. Would Aaron, I don't know if Belichick, Aaron has played with a lot of autonomy. And I think Belichick wants you to be, a good soldier.
I don't think he's leaving Green Bay for an offense that doesn't fit him. And that would be what the Patriots offense would be.
Yeah, and he's not, Belichick's kind of determined not to have the offensive weapons that you can have this day and age.
Nothing.
Because we're going through this incredible quarterback wide receiver boom because more people are throwing the ball starting in the younger leagues, right? High school, college. I can't imagine Aaron Rodgers not being in Green Bay, but he sounded like a guy that's gone. And he kind of threw Matt LaFleur under the bus
a lot
on Sunday. When they asked him about not going for it on 4th down when they were inside the 10.
Not my call.
Not my call. And there was a hesitation there, too, for those of you who listened to it. And I think he's ornery. He's incredible talent. Probably the most talented player to ever play the position. Now, Mahomes may eventually be that guy. But is Aaron looking for a spot, knowing that he's got at least 3 good years left, to put himself in position to go to the Super Bowl? And where would can the Rams? I don't think the Rams can do it the way the golf thing. First of all, I don't think they'll have any suitors for golf. And golf's a weird dude. To me, he's a nice player. He's not awful, but to me, McVay has kind of protected him with the way that McVay can do all that fun stuff running the football. He looks like he weighs 170 pounds to me. It's very odd. Maybe it's just deceptive, or he's a lot bigger than I think he is.
I disagree. I think he's exactly what you think he is.
Okay.
He's brittle.
Yeah. And so, but I don't think there'll be a market for golf.
You're not trading him.
Jimmy Garoppolo, it doesn't look like the 49ers are interested.
What if you saw New England and Belichick, who supposedly had a love affair for Jimmy G? What if they go back and get Jimmy G?
Oh, that'd be nuts.
And it opens up San Francisco.
And Aaron Rodgers is from Northern California and played at Cal Berkeley. So maybe Aaron would love to go home, so to speak, his last maybe 3 years of his career, and feels like because of what John Lynch is doing as the general manager of that organization.
Oh, they have pieces.
Former Tampa Bay Buccaneer and Denver Bronco, and it looks like they're running that organization really well, that Aaron's thinking, man, I can do this. I can do this with Shanahan and John Lynch.
I don't know what their draft capital is. I know the LA Rams have essentially no draft capital.
For our listeners, the big woof woof in the room, according to Mike Detillier, is what direction do the New Orleans Saints go?
Do they have to? What if Brees doesn't retire?
Oh, he's done.
He has to be, right?
He's not.
He can't play another season.
He's not coming back.
I agree.
And let's just be honest. Sean Payton doesn't want him to come back.
Nope.
And that's not a shot at Brees. It just is what it is. It's father of time. And I don't know what Brady's doing with his avocado ice cream, but and Brees is a workout freak. But will you read that quote from the NFL guy when he was referencing Michael Thomas and the way he has or hasn't been used in New Orleans?
Yeah, so it's from Ian Hartitz, who is a NFL draft guy and just NFL crazy man for PFF, Pro Football Focus, of course. And he basically talks about how the Saints have never utilized Michael Thomas to the best of his abilities because they've used a borderline tight end and a noodle-armed quarterback. Wow. A borderline. Here we go. Michael Thomas has caught 33 of 36 catchable targets thrown at least 20 yards downfield since entering the league. The fourth highest percentage, that's 92%. Fourth highest successful percentage among 64 qualified receivers. The slant boy jokes are fun, but I'd like to see the dude with a non-noodle arm quarterback / borderline tight end.
Talking about the pitchforks coming out of the Who Dat Nation, even though they probably know that that's the case, you don't talk about number 9 that way. But that guy ripped the Band-Aid off pretty quick, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, well, when you don't have an affiliation, you're there to just talk about what you see.
Right.
It's easy.
Sure.
I mean, they're not using it. He's a top 5 wide receiver in the league, and he's not being utilized like one because they can't.
According to an NFL insider, Michael Thomas has not been utilized the right way because Drew Brees hasn't been able to throw the ball down the field the last 3 years. Your reaction, Mississippi Ag, John Deere Tractor text line, 601-885-3776, is driven by your next John Deere tractor for your farm, family, land, or hunting camp. Brought to you by Mississippi Ag. John Deere, America's tractor. Mississippi Ag with 2 locations in the metro area. Canton, you can see it from I-55, and Pearl. Mississippi Ag, agup.com. John Deere, America's tractor. Mike Detillier coming up next.
Learn more. Go to Borgen.
All right, Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Brought to you, of course, by Madison Regional Academy, MRA, excelling in athletics and academics. Madison Regional Academy. Schedule a tour today. Coming off football championship, Coach of the Year and Coach Herbert Davis. You're going to want to get in where you fit in at Madison Regional Academy. Check them out, MRA Pats. MRA, schedule a tour today. We're going to go to the Miller Lite guest line. We're going to welcome in a friend of the show and Dallas Cowboys insider for DallasCowboys.com and an LSU superfan, David Helman. David, we appreciate you joining the show. Let's start with the obvious elephant in the room. Dak Prescott, is he staying or is he heading out of Dallas?
It's a wonderful question. It's been something we've been trying to figure out for the better part of 2 years at this point. Short answer is I really doubt he's going anywhere in the near term. The Cowboys can obviously still use the franchise tag on Dak one more time and keep him here for the 2021 season. But the big question is obviously what the long-term outlook looks like. And, both the Cowboys and Dak have said they want to get a long-term deal done, but they've been saying that for about 2 years and it hasn't happened. So the next few months are going to be really interesting.
Interesting. David Helman on the Miller Lite guest line, Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. So the latest, I guess, discussion around the league, obviously, is that there's going to be a massive quarterback shakeup. Deshaun Watson, we believe, is demanding out of Houston. The Aaron Rodgers uncertainty, given his post-game press conference and everything. Sam Darnold potentially being moved in New York. What if the Cowboys don't go for Dak Prescott, which is something that I don't want and a lot of our fans don't want, but we'll see. If the Cowboys don't go with Dak Prescott, is the draft or is a trade free agent the more likely option for Dallas?
I think, the fun thing is we're going to find that out in really short order because you're absolutely right. I mean, this looks like it could be an unprecedented year for quarterback movement in the league. The big one that you didn't mention is probably Matthew Stafford, who's a Dallas native. He grew up right down the street from where the Jones family lives. And, obviously the news came out earlier this week or last week that, the Lions and he were going to seek to part ways and get him traded. So there's a number of ways the Cowboys could find a quarterback of the future without paying Dak Prescott. It just kind of depends. What does that price tag look like? How much are you trading away to get an established quarterback? Is it realistic to think you could get a quarterback at number 10 in the draft, or do you need to trade up for one? And it all kind of goes together. And obviously, having the ability to put the franchise tag on Dak means trading him is probably part of that equation. I can't really imagine a scenario where they just let him hit free agency and sign a huge money deal and get nothing in return. So, and again, like I said, all that would have to happen probably before the draft. So one way or another, I think we're going to get some sort of certainty by April at the latest. It just depends on, is that a long-term contract for Dak or is that some sort of shakeup? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
David Helman, Dallas Cowboys insider, DallasCowboys.com on the Miller Lite guest line. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. So you're obviously in the building. You have your finger on the pulse of what the Cowboys are doing. If you're judging not necessarily what they will do, but what the vibe is in the building, is the feeling they want Dak Prescott and this is just a numbers issue that will get washed out, or is there real concern that they want Dak, but they're just not willing to make the concerted effort to keep him in Dallas?
Typically I love these questions because typically you're right, but I do have to acknowledge, unfortunately, I'm not in the building right now because of COVID.
That's true.
I was there. It was a bizarre season, man. 'Cause typically, I spend 40 to 60 hours a week in the facility when life is normal, but this year it was more like 1 or 2 days a week for a few hours at a time, and obviously nobody's allowed to actually have contact with, the members of the team or the front office, as a COVID precaution. So I feel like not just me, but everybody that covers this team, we're a little bit hamstrung compared to what we normally would be. Having said that, just from being there and knowing people and having conversations, I think the Cowboys want to sign Dak. That is the preferred, way that this all shakes out. They're committed to him. They've said it a bunch of times, publicly and privately. But the thing is the Cowboys always want to do it on their terms. If you go back to these contract negotiations from last year, they wanted to sign Dak on a 5-year deal. Dak wanted a 4-year deal. The Cowboys are obviously concerned about what COVID's going to do to the cap and how much paying a massive extension is going to hamstring them. And so I think the big question, it's not whether or not they want Dak. It's whether or not they can compromise, because Dak is obviously trying to get his maximum dollar value as well. He wants a shorter deal with more guarantees so he can hit free agency again quickly. And it's just going to I think it's going to depend on who blinks first. Like, are the Cowboys willing to sign a deal that is more friendly to the player, or do they absolutely have to be the winners in this negotiation? I think that's going to determine whether or not it happens.
What do you think? Does Jerry feel like he needs to be the winner?
I mean, their history suggests that they do feel that way, but I think this is a different animal. I mean, it's been 7 or 8 years since they've had to do a quarterback contract. The market has changed drastically, and I think Dak has a lot more leverage than a lot of the players that have negotiated with the Cowboys in recent history. If you just yes or no, gun to my head, I think they'll find a way to get it done. It might take longer than some of us would prefer. I know, I'm certainly tired of talking about it. I bet most people are tired of hearing about it, but I just, with what we've seen from Dak, with the progress that he's made over the last couple years, I think it's kind of silly to think that you're going to replicate that production just anywhere. If you could get up to number 1 in the draft and get Trevor Lawrence, maybe we could talk, but that is a super unlikely proposition. So, like I said, I don't know how long it's going to take or what it's going to look like, but if I had to guess, I think they find a way to get it done.
David Helman, Dallas Cowboys insider on the Miller Lite guest line, DallasCowboys.com. You mentioned progress. Let's talk about progress in terms of this offseason. How much of this signing Dak hinges on the progress of his health, and where is he in that progress?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, because obviously it was a super serious injury. It wasn't just a fracture, but a hyperextension and all that stuff. I mean, he was still on crutches as recently as when Florida was at the Cotton Bowl here. He went to visit Dan Mullen at the Cotton Bowl at AT&T Stadium, and he was still using crutches in December. It just kind of gives you an idea of the severity of it. Everything I've heard is that this is an injury that shouldn't, it shouldn't be. It's a pretty straightforward recovery process. He should be fine, and the Cowboys projected that he'd be able to do things on the field as early as April. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but, when you're talking a deal that's going to pay $40 million a year, you better make absolutely sure, and I'm sure that's going to be part of it, is that the Cowboys want to be absolutely confident that his recovery is going to be fine. And again, that's another thing that could lead to a tangle in all of this. And if we're thinking it all out all the way through, I could see the Cowboys saying, well, maybe we should just have him play another year on the tag and make sure that he's healthy. I just don't know how good of an idea that is, because if you're even remotely confident that he's going to be able to play the season, in my opinion, you might as well get the deal done and kind of put some of that cost behind you. But we'll see what happens as his recovery goes along. But as of right now, I don't have any reason to believe that it should be overly complicated.
Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. You're listening to David Helman, Dallas Cowboys insider, DallasCowboys.com, on the Miller Lite guest line. Let's segue a little bit to options, right? So let's say Dak doesn't get signed, or they franchise tag and they're going to trade, whatever that case may be. He's not going to be in Dallas long term. When you're looking at options, is the best option for the team as it's set up now a known commodity like a Stafford, or is there a better option on the table given the quarterback situation in the NFC East? And if they don't, I mean, are the Cowboys willing to trade up and get a quarterback regardless of whether they've signed Dak yet or not, or are they going to sit tight at 10?
I've said this a bunch of times, and obviously, there's no way for anybody to know that. Teams keep that type of stuff under wraps as much as possible. If you think back to like when the Eagles traded up for Carson Wentz and when the Rams traded up for Jared Goff, that stuff typically comes out of nowhere. Or, the Chiefs going up for Pat Mahomes is another example. They try to keep that stuff as under wraps as possible. Having said that, this is just a matter of common sense. I mean, I think the Cowboys need to have this thing figured out for the long term before the draft rolls around for a variety of reasons. I mean, I looked this up the other day. This is Jerry Jones' 33rd or I think 34th year owning the team. They've been in the top 10 of the draft just 9 times in that entire span. So it doesn't happen that often. You're not looking at a top 10 pick very regularly, because even when this team doesn't make the playoffs, they're usually, relevant enough that they're not this high up in the draft order. So you don't get this opportunity a lot. And if you're not committed to your quarterback, you need to take the chance on getting a guy, whether that's hoping somebody falls to you at 10 or putting together a trade package for one of, trading up to get Justin Fields or Zach Wilson, whichever one you like. You should be trying to secure your long-term future at the most important position. Or, if you think you've got a shot at Matt Stafford or Deshaun Watson or whoever else, you need to have that done. Because if you go into the draft, how silly does it look if you draft literally anybody, a cornerback, but you don't have a long-term option at quarterback. And let's say Dak plays well next year and the Cowboys go 9, even if they go 8-8, you're nowhere near quarterback range at 8-8. So you're taking yourself out of the conversation to get good quarterbacks while not securing your own future. It's just silly. And that's why I think this is all going to come to a head before the draft happens, because I think the Cowboys need to have clarity on what they need heading into that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Making sense is not something the Cowboys do a lot of, but that thought process makes sense.
It makes sense. That doesn't mean they'll follow it.
Exactly.
So that is the great question is, you can lay it out there. You can make a great case for why they need to have this thing figured out, and that doesn't mean they'll do it. So it'll be interesting.
There you go. ESPN 105.9 The Zone. David Helman, Dallas Cowboys insider on the Miller Lite guest line. Let's go with a positive route, for me at least. As a lifelong Cowboys fan, positive route. Dak Prescott signs. He's on the team. What are the Cowboys in desperate need of at number 10 or through the draft that will make them, take that next step, again, in an NFC East that looks to be about as open as it could be?
Yeah, and it would be such a relief if they could get this deal done and we can say, all right, now let's try to make the current roster better instead of worrying about all this quarterback stuff. I think the answer, I guess it can be good and bad, because I think the Cowboys need a lot. They're not one player away from being amazing. I think, if Dak is under contract, I think their offense should be electric without having to do a whole lot to it. But you're probably talking about needing to add a handful of players to that defense to improve it. Hopefully some of that would be in free agency. But as far as the draft, the obvious ones, you need cornerbacks. This team hardly has any under contract with the exception of Trayvon Diggs. So you're going to hear the names Patrick Surtain and Caleb Farley a lot, Virginia Tech and Alabama. Most people consider those the top 2 corners in this draft class. Linebackers, Penn State's Micah Parsons is going to come up.
Don't tell me we're drafting a linebacker in the first round.
As always, you have to consider all options. You have to absolutely look at everything. I agree with you. I think it's the least amount of bang for your buck. I also don't feel amazing about any of the options at number 10. And honestly, that's part of it as well is, I don't look at this draft class and see a stud that just makes a huge difference right off the bat. Like a Jalen Ramsey, I don't see that player in the Cowboys draft range. And I think that's why you see a lot of conversation right now about offensive tackles. Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern and Penei Sewell out of Oregon. Kyle Pitts, the Florida tight end, is another guy that people talk a lot about. And it leads to a really fun conversation where, anybody that watches this team is like, whoa, what are we talking about? This team doesn't need help on offense. This team needs a lot of defense. But unfortunately, the talent just doesn't really line up with the draft slot, in my opinion. There are some solid, like I said, Patrick Surtain, Caleb Farley, those are really, really good players. I think the Cowboys would be happy to have them. But you gotta, like I said, you gotta weigh all options and say, all right, if we think this tackle has all pro potential and we think this cornerback is merely good, what should we do? And I think that leads to a lot of interesting conversations.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it's at right now.
I think you've laid it out perfectly. I'm Team 50 Burger, so give me Kyle Pitts or Belichick this thing, not by picking N'Keal Harry over A.J. Brown or DK Metcalf, but Belichick this thing by trading back, getting more picks, and bolstering that roster and not picking at 10 if you're overvaluing someone.
If I could rub the magic 8 ball and get any outcome I wanted, I would love to be part of a trade back. Let's say Pittsburgh is at 24 and wants to come up for their quarterback of the future, and they want to give me next year's first round pick. I'm jumping all over that at the first opportunity, provided that Dak Prescott is under contract.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I think you could do a lot of damage trading away from that pick and adding 1 or 2 picks in this draft, because as it stands right now, they should have. I think they're slated for 10 draft picks this year, and so if you trade back, now you're talking about 11 or 12 plus a first in next year's draft. Yeah, I could definitely see the feel of that.
Absolutely. David Helman, Dallas Cowboys Insider, DallasCowboys.com, on the Out of Bounds Show, and the Miller Lite guest line. Let's talk quarterbacks. We're a quarterback-driven show. We talk quarterbacks in the SEC. We talk quarterbacks in the NFL. The NFC East, is Dak Prescott, if he were to stay in the NFC East, the best quarterback in the NFC East? And what are your thoughts on Carson Wentz and this whole, is he a shot fighter? Did the Eagles make the right decision in moving on from Peterson and sticking with Wentz? Give me your thoughts on the NFC East quarterback situation.
I mean, I don't think if Dak's future is in Dallas for the long term, I don't think it's even close that he's the best quarterback in the division. I mean, Carson Wentz completely fell apart to a degree that I can't even remember seeing. Daniel Jones, I've watched him play a dozen or so games at this point. I'm not even remotely sold. And then Alex Smith is a remarkable story, but he's obviously on the downside of his career. And even coming back from that injury, he didn't look like the guy he was even 5 or 6 years ago. So unquestionably Dak for the time being, although I will say I've got to believe, I'm not saying Carson Wentz is ever going to play as well as he did in 2017, but I've got to believe you can salvage that to a degree. Like, there's no way you go from being, a repeated Pro Bowler to just basically forgetting how to play the game of football. So I'm curious to see, the head coach Philly hired, Nick Sirianni. He worked with Frank Reich for a long time, and Frank Reich was Carson Wentz's offensive coordinator when he did almost win NFL MVP a few years ago. So I wonder if he can help him get back on track. I would be surprised if Carson Wentz just stays as bad as he was this year, but that'll definitely be interesting to watch.
Frank Reich now at Indianapolis, still looking for a quarterback. We discussed a little bit. I don't think the Eagles would now move Carson Wentz to Indy for any amount of money, given the fact that you just fired your whole staff to stay with Carson Wentz. But that would be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Let's stick with quarterbacks. Jets are at number 2. Jacksonville's at number 1. We think Trevor Lawrence is number 1, obvious. Is there any chance Trevor Lawrence doesn't go number 1? And if you're the Jets, do you trade for Deshaun Watson, or do you hang your hat on a rookie that you don't know anything about?
There's going to be a lot of smoke and mirrors about Justin Fields going to Jacksonville because of Urban Meyer's Ohio State connection. And until it happens, I'm just going to go ahead and call it BS. I don't think Urban Meyer's that dumb. Even if he is loyal to his guys, I think Trevor Lawrence is, people maybe get a little bit carried away about how good he is, but he's the type of quarterback that, only comes into the draft once a decade or so. He's the most polished quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck, and that was, basically a decade ago. So, no, I think he definitely goes number 1. And then, honestly, I'd be curious about that. I gotta think Houston can find a way to salvage that. It's insane to think that they're talking about trading their quarterback, 6 months after they made him the highest paid guy in the league. And he had, arguably the best season of his career individually. So I wonder what the cost for that would be. Because if I'm the Jets, with as many futile years as they've had and as many resources as they've stocked up between cap space and trading, I would definitely try to do it if the price wasn't insane. The problem is the price probably will be insane because it's very rare to see quarterbacks in their prime moved like that because they are so valuable. So I gotta see it to believe it. But yeah, if I was the Jets, I would absolutely be interested in talking about it.
Interesting. David Helman, Dallas Cowboys insider on the Miller Lite guest line. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. All right, real quick, I got about 2 minutes. Let's segue here. College football, bring it back to the SEC. I know you're an LSU guy. Obviously, you rode the highs of the Coach O National Championship, and then just like any drug addict, you came back down to reality, and that's what last year was. Let's talk real quick. Coach O has made 2 interesting hires. He's trying to recapture Joe Brady magic, but just because you come from the NFL doesn't mean you're going to be Joe Brady. What do you think of the OCDC hire, the latest obviously being Durante Jones out of Minnesota, a defensive back who's only been a DC at the D2 level?
Yeah, it's a little amusing to me because both of the hires, Jake Peets and Durante Jones, both of them kind of seem like Orgeron was like, all right, who do I know that has a connection to the 2019 team? Because, Peets came recommended by Joe Brady, and Jones came recommended by Dave Aranda. And it's just kind of funny, like, was like, all right, I got to get somebody in here who can help me replicate this, which obviously so much easier said than done. But, it's fine. I guess Orgeron got turned down for the DC job or couldn't make it work with his first 2 choices. So once you're talking about your third choice, it's just kind of take what you can get. So it's hard to imagine they could be worse on defense than they were last year. So I guess at least they have that in their back pocket. I mean, no offense to all of you state people, but I mean, the way we saw Mississippi State struggle on offense after what they did to LSU just keeps me up at night to this day. So, like I said, there's really only one way to go, and that's up after what we saw last year. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't think they'll be returning to the college football playoff next year, but as long as they play somewhat competent football, I guess I'll be happy.
All right, real quick, 30 seconds, David. Are you in on Orgeron, or is this kind of you caught lightning in a bottle and there's no chance it gets back to anything close?
You know what? The beauty of it for me is, like, it doesn't matter. I got an amazing season, like the best season in school history and the most amazing national title. So, like, it's a success. if Orgeron never has another good season, it's a success. So I'll take it. I'm cautiously optimistic that he'll right the ship, but even if he doesn't, that's okay.
There you go. David Helman, Dallas Cowboys insider, DallasCowboys.com, on the Miller Lite guest line. Thanks, David. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
David Helman, DallasCowboys.com. You can follow him on Twitter at David Helman. He is a great follow if you're an SEC fan and an NFL fan, because he's, as we mentioned, a big LSU guy, and really funny follow on Twitter. Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. I'm obviously Blake Scott, filling in for Bo Bounds on a beautiful Wednesday morning. Bank Plus Studio, live in the Bank Plus Studio, the Out of Bounds Show. We'll be back one more hour. Don't go anywhere. ESPN 105.9 The Zone.
With no money down and low monthly payments, our highly qualified home comfort whisperers install your new furnace or AC at no charge. Learn more at 866-EXPERTS or ComfortTechServiceExperts.com. See website for licensed